Whispers of the Ancients, Episode 10, the Swahili City States, Merchants of the Monsoon, approximately 1000 to 1600 CE, where ocean winds met the pulse of Africa's east coast 1,000 years ago, arose a constellation of cities shimmering with coral stone, echoing with Arabic chants, and flourishing in a rhythm driven by the monsoon. This is the story of the Swahili City States cosmopolitan crossroads where Africa, Arabia, Persia, and India mingled not through conquest, but through commerce and culture. Let us journey along the East African coast, from Mogadishu to Kilwa, and listen to the whispers of dhow sails, gold traded for porcelain, and empires built on coral. Segment 1, the coast that called to the world. Long before the rise of European navies, the Indian Ocean was already a vast liquid highway connecting continents. Its monsoon winds carried goods and people across thousands of miles, and the East African coast, with its deep natural harbors and barrier islands, offered an ideal landing place. Here, the Bantu-speaking peoples, whose ancestors had long farmed and fished the coastline, encountered visitors from Arabia and Persia as early as the 1st century CE. Over time, these contacts grew into permanent exchanges. By the 8th century, Muslim traders began settling along the coast, bringing Islam, new architectural forms, and a cosmopolitan ethos that would define the region. Out of this syncretic fusion, the Swahili culture emerged, a Bantu base overlaid with Arabic influences, with a language rich in both heritages and a lifestyle rooted in trade, refinement, and urban sophistication. Segment 2, Coral and Civilization, the Rise of Stone Towns. By the 11th century, the Swahili coast saw the emergence of stone towns, urban centers built from coral rock, lime mortar and mangrove timber. From Lamu in the north to Sofala in the south, these towns shared architectural features, elegant courtyards, shaded arcades, intricate wooden doors and towering mosques. Kilwa off the Tanzanian coast became the jewel of them all. Its great mosque, partially roofed, with soaring arches, was among the oldest and most impressive Islamic structures in sub-Saharan Africa. Nearby stood the Husuni Kubwa, a coral stone palace overlooking the sea, with more than 100 rooms and storerooms filled with Chinese porcelain, Persian glass, and African ivory. These towns were not political states in the traditional sense. Each city-state was autonomous, ruled by local elites, often tracing ancestry to both African and Arab forebears. Power shifted not through conquest, but through trade, marriage alliances, and the patronage of scholars and religious figures. Segment 3, the monsoon economy, rhythms of trade. The entire Swahili world moved with the monsoon. From November to March, northeast winds brought traders from Arabia, Persia, and Gujarat. From April to September, the southwest winds carried them, home with ships laden with gold, ivory, tortoiseshell, rhinoceros horn iron, and enslaved people. Markets bustled with goods both foreign and local. Textiles from India were exchanged for coconut oil. Spices like cloves and cinnamon were traded for timber and animal skins. The Swahili acted as brokers and translators, linking inland Africa with the vast Indian Ocean world. Kilwa controlled the gold trade from the inland kingdom of Great Zimbabwe, while Sofala funneled rest products from Mozambique's interior. Mogadishu became a textile powerhouse, famed for its fine cottons. Even Zanzibar, centuries later famed for cloves, began as a modest but active node in this vibrant web. Segment 4, Language, Faith, and Identity. The Swahili language itself, Kiswahili, is a living testimony to this fusion. Rooted in Bantu grammar but enriched with thousands of Arabic loanwords, it became the lingua franca of the coast. It was spoken in courts, bazaars, and poetry recitals, and eventually spread far inland along trade routes. Islam shaped Swahili identity. By the 11th century, most city dwellers were Muslim, and mosques stood at the heart of civic life. But this Islam was local and adaptive. While Arab traders brought orthodox practices, the Swahili developed their own religious traditions, often blending Islam with indigenous customs and spiritual beliefs. They built madrasas, employed Qadis judges trained in Islamic law, and celebrated festivals with local flair. Grave markers, prayer niches, and Arabic calligraphy adorned both mosques and homes. And Islamic scholars from Mecca and Cairo traveled to Swahili cities, just as Swahili pilgrims journeyed to Arabia. Segment 5. Beauty and refinement on the Indian Ocean. The Swahili world was not only mercantile, it was cultured. In cities like Mombasa, Lamu, and Pate, wealth translated into aesthetics. Mansions built of coral and mangrove boasted hand-carved doors with intricate floral and geometric designs. Walls were often whitewashed, with niches for incense and Quranic inscriptions. Homes were divided into gendered spaces. The men's area, or baraza, faced the street and was used to receive guests. The women's quarters were more private, richly adorned with textiles, jewelry, and intricately carved chests. These homes were sanctuaries of elegance and spiritual cleanliness. Music, poetry, and storytelling were treasured arts. The Utenzi poem written in Swahili using Arabic script became a favored form of poetic expression, combining heroic narrative with religious devotion. Skilled poets would recite epic verses by Lonti, when light, blending Islamic piety with local legend. Adornment was also central to Swahili culture. Women wore fine cotton or silk garments known as lisos or kangas, and adorned themselves with gold jewelry, henna tattoos, and intricately braided hair. Men often wore long white kanzas and caps embroidered with Quranic verses or arabesques. Swahili aesthetics blended the African and Islamic with a seaborne cosmopolitanism. Persian glass, Chinese porcelain, and Indian silks were not exotic imports, but everyday symbols of refined taste and global connection. Segment 6. Cosmopolitan citizens. Of the sea, though rooted in Africa, the Swahili considered themselves part of the wider Muslim world. They were heirs of Shirazi settlers from Persia, sons of Arab traders, descendants of African kings and queens, and proud of all their lineages. The elite often traced their noble ancestry to Shiraz in Persia or Hadramaut in Arabia, reinforcing their legitimacy and Islamic identity. Yet they also spoke a language drawn from Bantu roots and married locally. They were both African and international, shaped by centuries of migration, commerce, and intermarriage. This identity expressed itself not only in personal heritage, but in institutions. Islamic law governed marriages, contracts, and disputes. Friday prayers resounded from coral stone. Mosques whose pulpits were hand-carved by African artisans. Scholars wrote in Arabic and Kiswahili, sometimes in a unique script called Ajami Swahili, written in Arabic letters. Swahili sailors, known for their seamanship, traveled with monsoon winds to Arabia, Gujarat, and even as far as China. They brought back not only goods but ideas, fashions, and spiritual texts. Some even served in foreign navies or settled abroad, creating diasporic communities. What emerged was a civilization that belonged both to the shores of Africa and to the vast world across the sea. Segment 7. Inland connections, the gold behind the glory. While the Swahili world faced outward to the Indian Ocean, it also looked inland to the vast resource-rich interior of Africa. From the shores of modern-day Kenya and Tanzania, trade caravans moved into the hinterlands, connecting coastal cities to kingdoms deep in the continent. One of the most important inland connections was with the Kingdom of Great Zimbabwe. From its granite towers and stone enclosures, rulers controlled the flow of gold, ivory, and other commodities that eventually reached Kilwa and Sofala. The Swahili merchants, acting as middlemen, would exchange these goods for Indian textiles, Chinese porcelain, and Arabian horses. Other trade routes led northward into the Ethiopian highlands, or west toward the Great Lakes, where iron, salt, and enslaved persons were also extracted. The Swahili world relied heavily on these overland linkages and developed a complex network of alliances, tribute systems, and economic dependencies. But it wasn't just about material wealth. The ideas and stories of the interior also flowed toward the coast. Oral traditions, spiritual practices, and healing arts mingled with coastal Islam, making Swahili religion and culture even more unique. Segment 8. Enslavement and the shadows of prosperity. Like many trading civilizations, The wealth of the Swahili City States had its darker foundations. Human trafficking, particularly of enslaved people from the interior, was a tragic component of the Swahili trade. Enslaved Africans were captured through raids or wars in the interior and sold in markets from Lamu to Kilwa. Some were kept locally as domestic servants or laborers in coconut plantations. Others were shipped across the Indian Ocean to Arabia, Persia, or even India, where they served in households, navies, or royal courts. While not practiced on the same scale as the later Atlantic slave trade, the Indian Ocean slave trade was nonetheless vast and deeply painful. It left scars on inland communities and contributed to cycles of violence and displacement. The Swahili merchants often viewed themselves as mere intermediaries in a larger system, but their prosperity was undeniably linked to human suffering. This moral contradiction remains one of the most haunting legacies of the Swahili Golden Age. Segment 9. The Fall of Kilwa, Portuguese Cannons and Colonial Shadows. In 1498, the world of the Swahili city-states changed forever. That year, Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama rounded the Cape of Good Hope and arrived on the Swahili coast, seeking trade routes to the riches of India. The Portuguese were astonished by the wealth and organization of the Swahili cities. But they were not content to simply trade. They came with cannons, warships, and the ambition to dominate. In 1505, they turned their gaze on Kilwa. Kilwa, once the crown jewel of the Swahili world, fell after a brief naval bombardment. The Portuguese, under Francisco de Almeida, sacked the city, installing a puppet ruler and looting its wealth. The burning of Kilwa's palaces, libraries, and markets marked the symbolic end of its golden era. Though Kilwa survived, it never regained its former stature. The same fate would befall other Swahili cities in the coming decades. The Portuguese waged a campaign of domination, attacking Mombasa, Malindi, and Zanzibar. These once proud trading hubs were reduced to vassals' clients in a new, European-dominated global order. The Swahili coast, for centuries a bridge between Africa and the wider world, now became a fractured region under colonial siege. The rich mercantile system slowly crumbled as trade was redirected, cities were militarized, and cultural autonomy was eroded. Segment 10. Survival and Legacy. Swahili culture after the storm. Despite colonial aggression and centuries of upheaval, the Swahili people endured. In smaller ports, inland villages, and scattered islands, Swahili culture survived, adapting, persisting, and reasserting itself. Language remained a powerful thread. Kiswahili, with its Bantu roots and Arabic overlays, continued to flourish and even expand, eventually becoming one of the most widely spoken languages in Africa. Swahili architecture, coral mosques, intricately carved doors, and elegant courtyards still stands as a testament to a vibrant past. Oral traditions, music, and coastal culinary arts preserve the heartbeat of a world once at the center of global exchange. Even under the dominion of Omani Arabs, Germans, and the British, the Swahili identity never fully disappeared. In some cases, it subtly influenced the very forces that sought to suppress it. Today, Swahili culture thrives from southern Somalia to northern Mozambique and inland to the Great Lakes. In literature, music, and national pride, it continues to shape East African identity. Segment 11. Echoes of the Monsoon. A legacy across oceans. The Swahili civilization was not an empire in the traditional sense, no single ruler, no central bureaucracy, no great conquests. It was a network, decentralized yet interconnected, defined by shared language, customs, and the monsoon trade. Its legacy lives not just in ruins and artifacts, but in the living cultures of Africa, Arabia, Persia, and South Asia. Traces of Swahili influence can be found in Oman, where African rhythms echo in music and customs. On the Indian coast, stories linger of African merchants who once walked the same streets as Gujarati traders. In Comorian chants and Tanzanian poetry, Swahili voices still speak of voyages, love, storms, and gods. The dhow, the humble sailing vessel that stitched together continents, remains a symbol of this legacy. It speaks of movement, exchange, and adaptability. and it reminds us that the Swahili people were not isolated, they were global. Segment 12. Reflection, Lessons from the Shore. The story of the Swahili City States is a story of resilience. They rose not through conquest, but through connection. They built bridges instead of walls. They thrive on diversity, welcoming strangers, blending worlds, and embracing the rhythms of the sea. Their fall was not due to internal decay, but external disruption, colonial violence, and global shifts that shattered a delicate maritime order. Yet even in defeat, they left behind something rare, a legacy of cosmopolitanism, peaceful trade, and cultural richness. As modern Africa navigates the tides of globalization, the Swahili past offers a powerful reminder that greatness can be found in openness, prosperity in cooperation, and endurance in cultural pride. In the stone walls of Jade, the arches of Lamu, and the songs sung along Zanzibar's shores, the whispers of the Swahili merchants still echo, calling us to remember a time when Africa ruled the sea. Segment 13. The Swahili Revival. Heritage in the modern world. In the modern era, the Swahili coast is undergoing a quiet renaissance, a cultural revival rooted in pride, memory, and rediscovery. In Kenya and Tanzania, festivals celebrate Swahili poetry, music, and food. In Lamu, the Malindi festival draws thousands each year to commemorate the Prophet Muhammad's birth with processions, chants, and centuries-old traditions. The island, once a proud city-state, now stands as a living museum, its stone town still inhabited, its doors still carved with stories. Zanzibar, too, has reclaimed its past. The stone town, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is a labyrinth of coral rag buildings, narrow alleys, and bustling markets. Here, the legacy of Swahili architecture and social life still breathes. Artists and scholars gather to study and share the legacy of East Africa's coastal history. Cultural preservation projects restore old mosques, record ancient poetry, and teach young generations the stories of their ancestors. Even the Swahili language, once confined to the coast, has become a pillar of national identity. In Tanzania, Kiswahili is not only a lingua franca, but an official language of education, governance, and literature. Its spread across East Africa is testament to the enduring power of the civilization that birthed it. The Swahili City States may have faded as political entities, but as a cultural force, they have never disappeared. Their spirit persists in the rhythm of Tarab music, in the taste of spiced coconut stews, in the call of the muezzin from coral minarets. They live on in every wave that kisses the East African shore. Segment 14. Archaeology of the coastal sands. Beneath the palms and sands of the Swahili coast, archaeology continues to unlock secrets of a forgotten golden age. In places like Shanga, Kilwa, Gedi, and Ko, teams of local and international archaeologists have uncovered layers of stone houses, coral tombs, trade beads, porcelain fragments, and iron tools. These findings speak of a world remarkably interconnected, where Chinese celadon and Persian glassware shared space with African ceramics and locally woven textiles. The artifacts tell a story not of isolation, but of fluidity, of cities that pulsed with the coming and going of traders, pilgrims, and scholars. Excavations have revealed mosques, built as early as the 10th century, showing the early and deep integration of Islam into Swahili life. Carbon dating and material analysis have helped reconstruct ancient trade routes, economies, and even diets, confirming the cosmopolitan nature of these communities. And crucially, these discoveries have challenged older colonial narratives that denied African agency in building such sophistication. Today, museums in Nairobi, Dar es Salaam, and Zanzibar showcase these treasures, inviting Africans and the world to witness a past far richer than once acknowledged. Segment 15. Swahili, Africa, and the Indian Ocean world. The Swahili civilization was African, unmistakably rooted in Bantu language, kinship systems, and coastal traditions. Yet it was also something more, a bridge between worlds. It reminds us that Africa was not isolated before European contact, far from being a passive continent awaiting discovery. The Swahili story proves that Africans were active participants in global commerce, diplomacy, and culture for over 1,000 years. The Indian Ocean world, spanning from East Africa to Arabia, Persia, India, and beyond, was one of the first truly global networks, and the Swahili cities were at its heart. They were not merely recipients of influence, but shapers of it, adding their own flavor to the stew of civilizations that danced to the rhythm of the monsoons. In today's globalized world, where cultures mix and boundaries blur, the Swahili model offers insight, coexistence, negotiation, and synthesis can be sources of strength, not weakness. Segment 16, The Whisper of the Tao. Let us end with a vision quiet but enduring. On the shores of Lamu or Bagamoyo, as the sun sets behind the silhouette of a mangrove-lined coast, a dhow glides across the horizon. Its sail, triangular and white, catches the wind that once carried traders, sailors, poets, and pilgrims. That simple vessel, crafted by hand and guided by the stars, is more than a means of travel. It is a symbol of the Swahili legacy. It carries with it not just goods but stories, not just commerce, but memory. It whispers of a time when Africa reached outward, confident and connected, not as a colony but as a creator of worlds. The Swahili City States were not lost, they were layered into the living coast, woven into every tide. In the markets of Mombasa, in the chant of a Zanzibar poet, and in the laughter of children speaking Kiswahili, the spirit of those ancient cities lives on. They were merchants of the monsoon, but more than that. They were keepers of a dream, that from diversity could come unity, from trade could come peace, and from the sea could rise a civilization of stone, sail, and soul.